here. I think there's quite a lot of people online. I would like to welcome Joy today, who has recently joined the WISe.ART platform and who will be moderating. The webinar will be recorded. It will be then published or made visible on all our social media, and you will all the hosts, all the audience and the hosts and the co-hosts will receive a copy of the recording. So if you liked it, please share it. And on to you, Joy.
Thank you very much, 16. So yes, on behalf of the WISeKEY and the WISe.ART team, we would like to give a massive thank you for everyone for joining us today. So for today's webinar, we'll be discussing the following topics. Why should the public be interested in NFTs, such as collectors, museums, artists? What is in it for them? How does the market work from the artist's perspective as well as the collector's perspective? And why make NFTs? Are they an investment asset? Are they a fundraising tool? Do they have an impact in investment potential? So these are the core questions that we'll be asking over the course of this webinar. And as 16 mentioned, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our socials. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Erin Rose Sylvan and Christopher Ebel. So Erin Rose works with So Real, the NFT producer, and Christopher with Digital Arcades here in Switzerland. So if Erin Rose, could you please tell us a little bit more about your journey in the internet industry? How long have you been in it? What got you here?
Okay, that's a little bit embarrassing because it's a long time, but it is over 20 years. I've been over 21 years actually in the video game industry. So I guess that qualifies for internet industry. So really going back to, really 2000. If anybody out there in the world remembers the first startup bubble that happened back in 2000, I was sort of initiated into that in Paris after doing my MBA and entered the gaming space with a company called Ubisoft, one of the top creators in the world, really as they were at a point of really taking off despite having been in existence for over 15 years, but really helping them get to that next stage to become one of the top 5 gaming companies in their strategy department. So that's how my initiation into the world of the internets that has continued to this day through gaming, through art and technology, and with the partner through So Real and this sort of new frontier of the metaverse and NFTs, which in many ways I consider sort of an extension of gaming and the gaming world.
Okay. I've been told that the gamers are a very internet savvy group of people. They're very much into the Internet of Things and always kind of seeing new technologies come about, because gaming is a product of, I guess, technology as well.
Absolutely. I mean, gaming, it's now the first gamers were the first, the first forums, that they were the progenitors, and they are now the parents of all these youngsters that are the shit poster gamers, and that are probably the first initial guys. For me, this has all been this sort of like the heart and the core of this is from gaming, and particularly you'd say more like hardcore of like the PC gamer and sort of how it's expanded outwards from there.
Okay, wow, that's very lovely. And how about you, Christopher? Can you tell us a bit more about how long you've been in this industry and what got you started?
Yeah, wow. I mean, I do remember it. Also, unfortunately, remember the bubble, the 2000s.com. But I wasn't involved in that one, and I kind of looked at it and was like, wow, there was a lot of stuff going on there. That was super, super exciting. And so my background is, well, let's say the journey. That's the more fashionable term, I guess. While I did brain research, I led a huge project on brain research, and which kind of led me into computing, but also into getting very complex projects going. And the ideas around reality and the perception of reality were quite interesting to me at this point. I then started my own company doing mostly consulting for high performance computing, which is another component, I would say, in, well, the internet is maybe a pretty vague concept here, but clearly in technology and also in the, again, creation of artificial worlds, it's quite important, AI as well. And but in 2016, 17, I kind of saw the first wave, 18, come and go of the first crypto summer, I would say. Then for sure, from 2018 onwards, I was convinced that this was going to be the future, and started planning for this and thinking about how we can actually get into this space. And I think it clicked when NFTs became, when I understood what NFTs are, what the possibilities and the potential of this technology, of blockchain technology, applied to physical and digital assets and objects are. And this is how Arcades Digital was born, basically out of this sort of recognition that the web would never be the same, basically, after this, which is what we're seeing now.
Thank you very much. I would like to follow up with asking you a bit more about your business. So how does Digital Arcades work? What do they do? What is the service offering that you have? What components of the internet do you work on?
Right. I mean, so in a very general sense, we're basically making illiquid assets more liquid or investable, and that's sort of a very abstract way of saying this. But it applies to a number of different applications, such as art, and that's where we're kind of coming from. This is our first and most important vertical, and also our passion in that space, and it extends in many different ways. I mean, art, design, architecture, and as we progress through this sort of very, I'm sure we can talk about this sort of very let's say isolated, here's an NFT, here's a digital asset, please can you buy it, to going into the metaverse and offering items there in a whole different world, and to a whole different set of people, converging technology. So I think that's where we're coming from. But we also make other assets, like based on more traditional classes that you would think about, like real estate, or even tradable securities, stuff like that. So it's a pretty broad field, but for us, at the center of it really is art, design, and architecture. That's our driver.
You're building the infrastructure of the next internet, I see.
Well, a little part of it. I mean, there's so many players in there, but what we're seeing now is that the actual infrastructure is maturing quite a bit. What's missing are the ingredients, are the actual assets. I think that's kind of that's the business opportunity, if you will.
Okay. Thank you very much. Erin Rose, could you also tell us a bit more about So Real, and what business are you in exactly? How does it work? I see that you do virtual kind of augmented reality NFTs. Could you tell us a bit more about those?
Sure. And so we're also, despite the accent, I'm based in Switzerland, and So Real is a Swiss startup over in Bern. And so I head up the sort of cultural heritage and museums vertical. But as So Real as a company, we create 3D digital twins, 3D Pro, really sort of like the inside and outside of objects, as well as for like a fashion and industry perspective, industrial as well as fashion. And the retail aspect of that, for e-commerce, for product lifecycle management, for virtual sampling. But my specific area is cultural heritage, museums, and art. So helping museums, helping cultural heritage with their collections from a scanning perspective, but equally NFTs. And actually, that's that kind of like that little trigger that sort of changes that has changed the prioritization of, okay, digitization's happening after the PIM, after the new dam, after our like digitorials, after, it seems like, woo, wait a second, if this little bit is moved up, this actually can help a lot of other spaces. So it's actually a whole fundamental shift in thinking that, we'll be elaborating on here in these conversations, and how to engage. So like once that scanned asset happens, it performs multiple functions in addition to not only the NFT, but so many functions. So, and that's what's gotten very exciting as we've all have seen over these past 9 months or so.
Okay, wow.
Can I just butt in with a question? I know that you've also got a team working in LA. So do you think that this virtual reality or metaverse or whatever is also going to expand in the workforce? Like, we're all Zooming now and we've learned how to do that because of the pandemic. But is the metaverse, you think, the next stage where we're all going to be in virtual offices with our little avatars running around?
That's what Mark Zuckerberg's trying to push on us. You know, with the Meta and 10,000 new employees happening over the next couple of years. I mean, I think there's going to be an element of that. You know, it's how it's realized. I mean, that starts, I would say a certain question starts to come into play, as you all have probably experienced these last 2 years, being someone with a certain level of experience working with organizations or in an organization is one thing, and being that comfort level, sort of new employees coming into a space and engaging through just a screen has been incredibly challenging. Like, we're only addressing right now the mental health issues that have happened from these situations. The fact of like onboarding in this type of scenario for a new person in any situation is incredibly difficult. So I think it's not as obvious as one might suggest. I mean, I'm a hopeful person, but I think it's good to have a healthy level of skepticism too. And imagining a virtual will replace completely, I think there's a little bit sad, but we're actually seeing the results of that, the challenges associated with that as well. In many ways.
I think you're right. By the way, I think we forgot to say, Joy, that people in the audience can ask questions. So if anybody has a question, they can be put down in the chat box in the center of your screen down below, and we'll take them one by one. Over to you again.
Thank you very much. Yes, very, very interesting stuff. Thank you very much for sharing. Well, I would like to kind of go over a little bit of the context in the industry, kind of talk about how everything works, especially from your perspective. So one of my really introductory questions is, why has blockchain and NFT technology been such a disruptive innovation in the internet space? So I don't know who would like to start first, kind of express why you feel like this has been as big a deal as it has in recent history, whereas before it's something that many people ignored or overlooked, and now everyone's paying attention to it. So what was the catalyst? What makes it so different from other innovations that have happened in the space up until now?
So, I mean, Erin, Rose, do you want to grab that first round where we work pretty well together?
Yeah, exactly. We'll bounce off each other. We sort of tag team. I would say there's a certain level of, you know, blockchain. It's, you know, it's almost like the preacher coming up and saying, blockchain, it's going to be important. It's going to be important. And you're thinking, okay, what's the utility? Like, what's the functionality? And NFTs, and particularly art, has amazingly sort of connected. You know, I wouldn't always say art. You know, of course, there's been digital art and generative art for years and years, but this has allowed for a connection and seeing the utility for that, and equally that connection of, like, you know, what's existed. And I know in Europe that, you know, artists have royalty set up, but that isn't the case in the United States. So it's almost like that royalty model. And again, I would say the arts has generally not benefited in royalties in general, but I think the blockchain allows for this, and having smart contracts has allowed for this in a way that it hadn't existed before. And equally, frankly, the past 19 months, a whole bunch of people were in front of their screens, spending a whole lot of time, that were looking at things a little bit differently. That also allowed for something to happen and bubble up a little bit differently as well. So I think these are a couple of factors, and I believe Christoph will add more and even elaborate on what I've just said.
Yeah, I can do that. So there's and I think, yeah, absolutely, that's exactly what happened also in the last couple of months. A lot of people like to also point out that, you know, when you go from the evolution of the web, and that's one way of looking at it as well, right? We have this, what we call Web3 right now, and you may have, you know, people in the audience may have heard that and read the concept. It's quite helpful to actually look at what Web 1 was and Web 2 was, and Web 1 obviously is sort of that's the 90s, 1990s, where we started having AOL and similar services where first we started to actually be able to interact with the internet, in the sense that it was like a database that you now could access, basically. So it's kind of a one-way thing. Then Web 2 came along really after I guess the .com bubble started in a way. It's what we have now, more or less. It's the social web. It's interacting, through, let's say, Facebook as the iconic sort of Web 2 service, but also Google and others. It is an internet that's mediated through individual companies that are mega corporations in many cases, some of the biggest corporations in the world, that sort of intermediate between and control networks. And Web3 is kind of the next generation. That's what we're kind of transitioning into now. And here we have a peer-to-peer network that is that tends to be more decentralized. And NFTs have, or let's say tokens, NFTs have this, and blockchain technology have enable that in a sense that they enable also the transfer of value between people, between individuals, the transfer of ownership and other types of contractual relationships that are now immediately possible and can be done directly between people. So the sort of decentralization is ethics or ethos that goes into this Web3. So if you put that together with art, with material goods or digital goods, then you can see that now we have a situation where a true economy is possible, kind of like in the real world, right? Where we can actually exchange things and we can start disintermediating the web or the internet in this sense. And that's kind of the promise of this. Has its problems as well, of course. And when we all say, well, the decentralized web, then we talk about an NFT marketplace, and we're like, well, but these are quite centralized marketplaces, and there we see some of the problems already. But I'm sure that's something we can talk about.
All right, thank you very much. I've heard a lot of people saying that the Web 3.0 is going to be the most democratic internet where everyone owns a piece of the web. But it's true that a lot of trade happens on platforms. And so we're not seeing that decentralized aspect yet. And I think that's very interesting. And it leads nicely onto the following question, which is the greater public ready to embrace this new technology? Or has circumstances, COVID, forced the adoption of more a digitalized world? Would have NFTs been as popular if people were still able to go out and go to trade shows? Or was this really accelerated by the pandemic? Or is this something that the world was going to steer itself to, regardless of whether we were locked indoors or not? And what does this mean for the future of Web 2.0? Will we still have this 2D kind of interface with the internet, or will everyone kind of be walking into a metaverse, so to speak, where to access a website, you have your avatar digitally walk in and interact with the space rather than you being on your computer and looking at a 2D screen?
Let me just say something quickly to the adoption, and not talking even about the pandemic. Just I think we're at the same. We're back in 1994 again, right? In terms of like, if you just do the comparison with, do you have, when people asked you, can I send you an email? You had to like phone somebody and ask if they had an email address, and then see if they would accept your anything. It's kind of like that's the same sort of situation we're in right now. And yes, the adoption is just not as high as it could be. And has it been accelerated in the last in the last 2 years? Yes, 100%. I don't know. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. And the pandemic has clearly pushed this a lot and pushed us to think about this.
Certainly, it has. I think there's a greater involvement for content creators as well. Now that there isn't as many outdoor spaces available, we see a push for a lot more digital content in recent history. I feel it's something that a lot of people are turning towards. Thank you very much. I guess now we can really dive into the meat and potatoes of the webinar. So with the current state of play, and yes, sorry, 16.
Sorry, we have a question. So I would like to thank Youssef Syed for his question, and I think it's directly to Erin Rose. Youssef wants to know, back in the day, games would regularly trade objects for real money within the games like World of Warcraft, which I'm sure you know. How does the modern situation differ from this?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. If you look at the gaming space, they're a little bit reserved, or they have been reserved about this whole NFT business, because it's very, we've seen a lot in the gaming industry. We've seen the 3D televisions, and we've like jumped on so many sort of bandwagons of new things. And a lot of this, again, reflects of what happens in games, maybe without the blockchain behind it, but creating assets. Like players can create assets, and sell them in marketplaces. You have that in Roblox. So this just starts to, it's sort of like the connection outside of that, those objects, on a blockchain that can, go into another game, like thinking of what that whole means. So it becomes very much an extension of what has and continues to exist in gaming, and sort of like what that means. And I go back to sort of like two things from a gaming space, like like even the games that are kind of blockchain games and sort of these types of things, was the most important thing is like the game, these assets or these things that bring joy, or they have a utility. But in gaming, it's like joy of having it, and so like that has to be a driver, particularly in the gaming space. And or it's just sort of that point of utility, like, or it's flexing in a way, and we'll see that more. But it's remembering that, and definitely from a gaming space, that's very important. And again, there's so many, I keep going back, there's so many, this is I see all the history, it was written in gaming, all of this.
I think as well, the aspect of collectibles, and that is as history, as the track record happens and as history passes, like we saw the first CryptoPunk being sold, but I know now that, for example, the fashion industry is designing skins for the games. And so those first shoes or that first coat or that first armor will become collectible in time.
Well, like you saw back in April, May, Gucci's been incredibly active in various ways. They've done things with Patagonia, with Pokemon Go, but they were in Roblox, and for a time they had a purse that was available in Roblox, and the actual digital version was the NFT version was more expensive. They didn't even call it an NFT though, but the digital version was more expensive than the real life version. So there was a moment of that, and you're like, like, what does that mean? Like, what is happening here? So yes, you have a lot, absolutely. And there's going to be happening with luxury brands that you'll buy what they're working on is you buy the real thing and you have the digital version too. So, and then that actually helps them if they have the digital version, they can keep on, because, there's the whole resale, and now we're in this mindset of reselling of goods, and the importance of that, but the value even gains with the Chanel object or Hermes purse. So now if you have the digital thing, they can touch your return on revenue. So they start to say, like, okay, this has to be good.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and the same goes also for larger goods, not just your clothing, but actual currently in the metaverse, if I may be as unspecific, there is people are starting to sell real estate, right? Like, and buildings. We're involved with a company where we actually sell architecture for games for metaverse developments, and this is, I think, one of the next big trends as well in that space, right? As the land actually gets more and more expensive and more sought after in some of those, like in Decentraland or the Sandbox, which are both metaverses, which you, by the way, can also check out on the internet right now. It's like you just literally just Google for it and you can go have a look. And so I think these economies are getting replicated in a certain way in the metaverses with their additional twists. And I think maybe one comment on, like, when we talk about NFTs, a lot of times, it becomes sort of its own thing, but it's actually just a carrier technology, right? Just to kind of, sort of tag on the value on and carry the value and some properties and ownership properties of this particular asset, whether it's a house or a purse or a car or something that's literally a digital representation of something desirable, or a weapon or a piece of armor in a game. And I think as Anne Rose just also evoked, was that these things are converging, right? The gaming industry and the metaverse industry aren't that far apart, right? These are maybe at some point it's the level of, let's say, directed engagement that determines whether this is a game or just sort of a place you hang out. In terms of the technologies, even the development of these worlds are very similar now. And we're actually involved in a Metaverse development project where, one of the first questions was, well, are we going to do this in Unity or in Unreal Engine? So it's like, that's the same stuff that we're using to make games, essentially, right?
Thank you very much. I guess we kind of partially answered the question that I had raised previously, which is why the public should be interested. So I think from an entertainment standpoint, we see why gamers are very much involved in the sphere, because they've always been involved with transactions and exchange of collectibles within games. And I think with NFTs, maybe these might become more cross-platform, where if you have one, for example, Gucci outfit, you can always transfer it from one player in one game to another. Maybe that's probably part of the value that is being created by this digital transformation, is that you can have one asset shared across multiple platforms as opposed to having one asset on that one platform. Is that a safe assumption to make? Have I understood kind of the potential that this may have in the gaming industry?
Yeah, actually, just as you were saying that, I'm like, why wouldn't someone also be able to rent their item to somebody? Maybe it gives them, like all of a sudden I'm like, why that happens in real life? Why wouldn't you be doing that in the game? Like that you could rent it. So exactly, it does. So thank you, Christophe, for confirming that for me.
No, and people actually are we're working with a company in Zurich, Kublai, and we're building stuff in the Metaverse with them, and we bought a house together, or set up a house, and basically the idea is to rent this out for events, right? So there's an event this afternoon happening there. We did a little scavenger hunt. People had to go through the Metaverse, find clues, and then they got the access code, and they got an NFT was gifted to them on one of the stations, and that NFT, if you carry it, meaning if it's in your wallet, the scanner at the, you get scanned like this, literally. Your avatar gets scanned, and if you have the NFT in your wallet, then you get access to the event, right? So that's kind of one of the ways that you can do stuff. And then there's a surprise guest, and you only have access if you have done the tasks, right? And you can see you can see the potential here, right? That's what I meant also before. It's this sort of, there's a little tiny mini game that's happening inside of the Metaverse that you can set up for certain purposes. In this case, it's this is experimental, but it's kind of user engagement, right? And you get people attached to what you're doing, to your brand. People, by the way, the walls of the house or of the building are sort of transparent, so people can actually see that's something going on, and they're like, oh, how do I get in? So you can do all kinds of stuff there. That's really, really, pushing the envelope, and it's really fun and engaging, right? But there's this convergence happening, and and you can transfer stuff from one place to the other, which, you buy the land, you buy the assets on marketplace that are actually outside of the game in some cases, and then you just carry them in there. But so this is just the beginning.
Yeah, and I think to build upon that, it'll be interesting. What we had talking back to Web 1.0, there was everything was walled gardens. To the point you were in your AOL walled garden, and even we were talking about 2010, 2012, everyone was sort of building up their spaces, and a little bit of concern like the Metaverse, and right now a little bit with Facebook talking Meta. There's a certain, personally, these past 3 or 4 weeks since that was announced, I've kind of felt a little bit of air has come out of the room of Metaverse, because you feel like it's sort of gone corporate, and that somehow they've taken an ownership in this space. So I mean that's just the sentiment I've gotten from these corners of there's a certain energy of Metaverse. It's open, anything's possible. Trying these things, and then when you have this big player come in, it's so that's going to be interesting, because again, it's about it being open, and that's that whole thought of it, and seeing how that we don't end up with walled gardens, or we don't end up with these types of spaces that isn't sort of creator pushed and user pushed, as opposed to sort of corporate structure force.
Yeah. I think that's a really important observation, and it also reminds me a little bit of like the promise of the internet as such back in the day, right? It was like this, it was going to democratize information, right? And well, has it? Yes, to a certain degree, but it also has created, you know, an enormous amount of misinformation and very problematic content, and you know, there's just a huge amount of like really bad stuff out there, right? So you know, what's going to happen with this? I mean, again, I think the technology itself doesn't actually do much. It's really the people building in there, right? It's like everywhere. You can't really dissociate, or at this point at least, we cannot dissociate the technology from what people do with it. So I think what, and I kind of want to push this into the and sort of the, you know, the question what you got that you guys asked, you know, what's in it for artists, and I think one thing that's in it is that well, activism is in it. You know, you can actually help shape this now, and you can actually bring your creativity and your subversiveness and your questions and all of that. You can bring that to the space now, and this is, I think, you know, just to answer one of your questions, I say just one of the answers that are possible. It's like, well, why would you do this? Well, because you need to actually shape this right now. You have to step up to the plate and say, like, no, we do not want this to just be a huge corporate enterprise, you know, to sort of evil Zork company sort of kind of taking it all over. But we actually want to propose alternatives. We want to, you know, make it, you know, ask the questions that need to be asked, and also build stuff that are alternatives to what's being proposed to us. So I think that's one of, for an artist, I would say that's a huge draw. It's a task, really.
That's very, very insightful, and it ties in very nicely with one of the questions we have from our audience, from Yusuf, and he asked, yeah, there's many knockoff items in real life, so why wouldn't this happen with NFTs? Because you said we really want to encourage involvement and participation, and this also kind of goes along with the idea of not wanting one mega corporation really being in charge of everything. But then if everyone really gets involved, what's preventing them from being not really counterfeit, but knockoffs, or someone making an approximation of what a fashion brand would do, and it's like, I made this myself, it's half the price because it's not the brand, and the cosmetics still look virtually the same. So how would that kind of be counteracted within the metaverse space, so to speak?
I mean, it goes back to, you know, what is it? Copying is the greatest form of flattery. I mean, that happens, you know, that drives, I mean, I just remember like Louis Vuitton, like the fact that everybody was copying it, that drives people's desire for the brand. So there's like this balance between, oh, we don't like it, but kind of we do, you know, type of behavior. Equally, you know, what was happening with the CryptoPunks, you know, copying, going right click, you know, save and saying, oh, I have it too, you know, but actually the act of doing that and you wearing it promotes the value of the thing. So it's sort of like always that sort of balance between these types of things. You know, ultimately, if as an NFT, there's the blockchain, there's like, you know, there's the stample on that thing is the real thing. And, you know, if you're trying to get, you know, make something out of it beyond the sort of pretend flex of having something, the value comes with having the original as.
Yeah. It's quite similar to the real world. I mean, it's not different from, you know, having a fake watch or fake purse or fake, or, you know, whatever. It's not the same. But before NFTs, essentially, it wasn't clear because you didn't know who had the original. Now you do. Now you can have the sort of certificate of authenticity, you know, and you can show that it's yours. So I think that's the difference. It doesn't, and I think that's a common sort of maybe misconception, and NFTs they don't provide copyright protection per se. I mean, it's not like a protection against copying stuff. You can totally download or, you know, screenshot art if that's what you want to do, but it's not the same as and I think that's what I think people understand. If you're in this world, I think it's clearly understood and people aren't worried about it. But it's a legitimate question, but it doesn't really you know, play out that way.
Well, and it's to your point, like Christoph, it's like having a poster. We're talking about art. It's like having the poster of the Mona Lisa. Like, you're happy that you have it, but that's not the Mona Lisa. You know, you maybe even had someone paint you, like do it. You know, they did a 3D printing of it. Like, that's great, but it's not the Mona Lisa. You know, and that same, you know, and then maybe a little, if you got some sort of a limited edition lithograph of something that has, it's a limited, you know, like it has something with that associated with that, but it's, you know, we have those examples in the real world of how this sort of manifests itself.
Yeah.
So
It's the same dynamic, and including also the valuation. I mean, people ask, you know, how do you value, you know, NFTs? What makes, or like digital art versus real art, or like real world art? And I mean, it's a hard question to answer, because even like regular, like physical art is hard to, I mean, how does that work, right? I mean, a painting doesn't really have intrinsic value per se in terms of utility, maybe a little bit, but apart from the materials used, there isn't much value to it, and or maybe the labor that's been mixed with the materials. But you know, the actual value is given to the piece of art by the market, by people who appreciate it, by manipulation, all kinds of stuff, right? So it's and the dynamics are very similar in the digital world, except that they might be sometimes a little accelerated.
And Christoph, I mean, even if we're talking about real art, you know, that's, what is it, anywhere between 20 and 40% is fake of real art. Either 16 am I supposed to talk those things, but like,
come on now.
I've been a wet blanket here.
Nobody wants it even authenticated, that it might not be. So like, we can talk about the world of like how, oh my goodness, like I clutch my pearls, you know, in NFTs. It's like, nobody's clutching their pearls in the real world of art, where some shady things have been going on for, if not centuries, decades, if not centuries.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but there are ways, and as an art historian in the art market, there are ways to evaluate art, and we come back to this collectability. And yes, something is of value, and that's anything collectible is what the market is willing to pay for it. But of course, there are guidelines at the end of the day. But that's another question, and I'm happy to develop that further on another platform.
No, I mean, this is true. I mean, I think we're aware of the sort of like the criteria and what, you know, like there's a whole I have the handbook somewhere as well. But I mean, you know, just just saying in terms of the in terms of like how it really then develops inside of the let's say the communities. That's the interesting part. And maybe, by the way, maybe an interesting thing to talk about is really communities around NFTs and art and so on, because that's kind of a key ingredient. And yeah,
I think that shouldn't be sort of minimized in any capacity, because that's quite fundamental, that what we've seen. But we'll let you guide us.
I mean, I'm glad you touched upon that, because it does lead us onto the next topic of conversation, which is, you know, the community. And so one of the follow-up question is, could you describe or explain how the market would work from an artist's side, and how this would work from a collector side? Because yeah, it's very different. As I think as an artist, you're the one trying to create the value, but then if the value is dependent on the market, then how does that really work for you? What do you have to do as an artist to really get yourself out there? And as a collector, do you have to build a following in order for the collectibles that you collect to have value, or do you just kind of go with what you enjoy? So I guess it's, how does it work from both perspectives? Maybe Erin Rose, if you would like to start us off with that.
This is the complicated bit. And I mean, I guess if I look at sort of like the purity, and excuse me, I'm thinking of it that way, like the purity of the artist. You know, I come from parents that were artists and art professors, and, you know, and surrounded by artists, and trying to, you know, survive on their art, and the challenges of that. You know, you make compromises and you make choices. And in many ways, you know, that you have to, in some ways, that you're building, and what your creation might be coming from a place in yourself, and then all of a sudden you have to almost connect outwards to, you know, find community or market your, like the sort of pain of that. And I think that's going to prove itself very challenging for a certain type of person, or a certain type of, you know, someone expresses themselves in a certain way, that all of a sudden realizes they have to, like, not only be be a creator, but they also have to kind of be a marketer, or, you know, work within a team that's going to be building their marketing for them to create a community. Because I think in a certain way, that's a little bit different. I mean, I would say you would, and maybe it's me being very naive, but I mean, you would have a certain, you'd work with through your agent and your gallery, and it's sort of, they build the thing around. But now it's sort of like, I think of as an artist, as like a journalist. You can't only be a journalist nowadays. You have to be a videographer. You have to be a social media poster. You have to do the, like, you have to do, your skill set has to be so varied and agile and multiple, that I think a lot of that it leads into many roles, but I think it very much so, and very contrasting for somebody in the art fields, which I think is quite challenging.
Yeah.
and-
I would agree with that, and you know, there are already some metrics that are being developed, sort of like, what's the likelihood of, let's say, an NFT drop to be successful, and it's really measured by, you know, how big's your Discord following, you know, how many Twitter followers do you have, and what, and by that you can sort of like estimate how many NFTs you can actually put into a collection in order to sell them, right? So if you have 10,000 Twitter followers, this will take about, you know, you can drop a collection of 5,000 and make money, and you know, it's very much a community driven thing. And this sounds a little bit cynical now in a sense, because you were just looking at the numbers, but what it implies, of course, is that you have a community that's already existing, right? That are interacting with you. You're interacting with them. Maybe you're a collective. A lot of times it's not just one person, one artist, but it's their collectives that are working together, that amplify each other's work, and also their presence in social media, exhibitions, and you know, all those channels that you can think of. You know, Clubhouse has been very big, actually, also in getting careers started in this. And when we say career started, we honestly, we were talking about, you know, 18 months ago, 12 months ago. One guy I talked to 2 days ago was, it's like, well, I got into the space in April, and now is curating NFT collections in Paris, right? So I mean, it's not like I think what we can see here is a massive acceleration of the dynamics that are fundamentally similar to what we've had before, but they're just the velocity is just much higher. And I think that's a challenge for people to just kind of catch up, and we're not used to this, because, you know, it's not like you just open the New York review of books, or like the feuilleton of your favorite paper, and you just kind of read the reviews and sort of kind of digest this sort of over time, but it's just happened instantaneously. And by the time you wrap your mind around, this stuff is already kind of passé, you know, depending on. And so, you know, how do you make selections there? What is really going to be of lasting value? What is going to be in your, and this is, I think, 16, I mean, just coming back to what you said, there are methods to do that. And it's true. I think then you can look at, you know, does somebody have really, does somebody have the skill? You know, is somebody really a good artist in a sense? I mean, we work with one guy who's a great artist, we believe, and you know, he has been a Photoshop specialist for like 10 years, and so he knows how to manipulate pixels, right? And you can see it in the art, right? It's really good stuff, and you know, there is some craft to it. So I mean, there are ways to look at this from this perspective, especially in this sort of high velocity, high volume kind of environment.
Yeah, I think that artists will need that help as well. I mean, I was talking to Nagel and Drexler, the German NFT gallery, who's like in Basel in September. They were the only ones, and then now in Miami they were speaking and everything. And Saskia was saying that's what the gallery's role is as well. And I think all these platforms like OpenSea, like Super Rare, they don't have that sort of curatorship or vetting component that we're trying to do with WISe.ART. And also, I think the technology changes so quickly that, as you said, the experimented artists who are not just discovering the medium now, they'll be able to embrace all the changes much quicker, but much more agile, with much more agility and quality at the end of the day. But that's like in any industry, there's always, you know, for every 10,000 singers, there's one that makes it. Same with for every 10,000 footballers, there's one that makes it. So I think, yeah, you can't get away from experience, and those who are in it for the quick buck, I mean, they're going to fall on their face, I believe. That also brings us to the next question with Marcella. Thanks for being here, Marcella. And she's talking about even taking it further in the technology now that we're starting to see holograms as well. So maybe the 3D will soon start to be interactive in that way. And it just goes so fast. Like to me, it's like every day there's something new. And some artist was saying not long ago that this is probably the biggest revolution in the last 100 years for the art world, because I mean, every day you wake up and there's something else you can do. So if you're a little bit, as an artist, a little bit curious and creative, I think there's a lot of distance to be covered, which is really exciting at the end of the day. And I talk too much. Go on, Joy.
Sorry. As you mentioned before, yes, Marcella did have a question, which is how will the different technologies kind of overlap with each other? So we have one of the questions: do you think that there will be one metaverse, or will there be multiple metaverses? And how about holograms within these metaverses? So I'm not sure if I'm interpreting the question correctly, but I'm assuming that how will the metaverse be accessed? Is there a portal that will be made by someone, or is this an idea where, once again, everyone has to kind of be in control of their own brand? You as an artist, you kind of have to have your own following in order to build that buzz around your name and your products. Would that sort of thing also have to be happening with everyone who then engages with the metaverse, where they have to kind of be their own content creators and build their own things and have people come to their metaverse? Or is there's one unified portal where everyone goes to and does all of these things? Similarly, kind of with what you mentioned with real estate infrastructure and architecture, is this Decentraland. But what if you buy land in another platform? Was that something that's still possible? Would it still have as much value? What are the implications of technology within technology, so to speak?
So if I may just grab this one just to clarify, I think there are going to be many different metaverses, and I think they're just the first movers here. That's and they have enough potential capital as well to stay around, but there's no telling how this will come out, right? I mean, there might be something much better that's coming around, and people are definitely competing against sort of those early versions. So I think you can look at these as technology platforms in a certain sense of what's possible today, but there's always trade-offs, right? I mean, it has to be, we were talking about doing a photorealistic, I mean, sort of going into a hologram thing, making a photorealistic metaverse, which you could, with the engines that we have today. But then, you're talking about, transmission speed of the actual data. You have to have very heavily armed computers that are actually running super high-end graphics to actually render all of that stuff. So you have to make those trade-offs. Which kind of brings, I think it's a really good question that was asked. Yes, I mean, one way of dealing with this is then you can create within those 3D worlds. You can, of course, then also create, let's say, like holodecks or holographic experiences that are, of course, possible within that. And you can go there, and then you don't have to render the entire universe like this, right? But I mean, that's definitely possible.
Thank you very much. I have more of a follow-up question regarding the artist and collector side on the NFTs and the whole metaverse. Is what do you think users as a public look for when they enter a platform? What is it? What kind of services should we offer? As 16 mentioned earlier, there's this kind of need for not necessarily white collar, white glove services, but kind of a hands-on approach to help people understand how the new industry works. The fact that it's not you just coming to a platform and selling your artwork, it's you being aware that you have to build your own community. Similar to Facebook, similar to Instagram, is you can be on Instagram, but being on the platform doesn't guarantee you a sale. It's more so, what services can we help provide, or what can you do what can we advise you to do? How do we grow your viewership? So what sort of services would people be looking for if they get involved in this industry? What sort of services and aids would the greater public want when trying to embark on this journey? As a collector or even as an artist, do you think this is a valuable add-on to what's currently available in the market? Or is this not that useful, and that people really want to be left to their own devices on the market?
I'll take a portion of this one. So I think, first of all, I think, you know, if I'm an artist, if I take it from the hat of an artist and I'm looking at sort of platforms, you know, you're looking at it in a similar way. You're looking for that gallery fit. So are you, you know, if this one, if in the level of experience, you know, like if I'm a complete Luddite. Well, I don't know if I want to use that term because I think it's a loaded term, and actually it's improperly used. So say it's just I'm a newbie and from a technical perspective and wanting to engage and or have a sort of a limited capacity and realize that this is not my skill set and I don't want to build out here and go to experts, but I want to find, you know, it's sort of that levels of degrees of that engagement and, you know, that onboarding type of process, and equally the types of audiences that partner can bring. And I think that becomes quite the sort of like that feeling and that fit. So I think you're probably going to find a lot of similarities between sort of the gallerist and the artist, and like there's the fit and the audience that they'll be connecting to and the way in which they'll be connecting, and it's going to be resonating, the type of work it reflects, a type of portfolio that's going to be reflecting in a way that resonates and makes sense, and actually can help the artist build and grow as well.
Yeah. I think what you can also bring to the artist and make it desirable to work with you as a platform would be to have, well, apart from the curation services, would also be a network on the demand side, right? I mean, saying like, okay, we have a bunch of you know, collectors that we are actually that we're in touch with, and whose maybe preferences we are aware of, or also like what they want to do, what kind of collections they want to build. And then to bring have this sort of function of intermediating, you know, this relationship, and I think this whole relationship piece is something that's, you know, and I think you mentioned you kind of alluded to it before, but do people want to be left alone and left to their own devices and just be peer to peer and everything? Well, yes and no, right? I mean, there's clearly both things are present, but I mean, in a completely disintermediate, trustless sort of situation, is something, and this brings us back to what we said at the beginning, you know, about the meetings, like virtual meetings. I mean, something gets lost too, right? And I think there is going to be an increased market for actually restoring some of that, or actually compensating for some of that void that's there. So I think, you know, having this service and having this sort of you know, interpersonal and relationship focused kind of approach, I think that's not a bad idea. I think that could be very good, actually.
I also think that the messages or the aims of the NFTs by different people, artists or museums, like we didn't speak much about museums, but I mean, this whole digitalization and then raising funds, whether it's for a quick buck or whether it's an actual process now in their budgeting, that they have NFTs to restore things or to bring up a new exhibition or whatever. There's this whole concept as well. There's also a lot of artists that use it as a new medium just because they're curious, but also there's impact as in sustainability goals, etc., that are also involved. We've got a potential lead who wants to do a collaborative song, and it's really the end of the day, it's to reforest Indonesia and to call it the Forest Nation. So things like that. I mean, there's lots of different uses, and I think we need to be open as the security platform provider to give them what we know how to do best and help them get their message across the best way we can. We've started onloading our artists now since Art Basel Miami. That was sort of our thing. So it's a preview, and we've got, I'll just name them because I think it's nice to showcase our artists already. So we've got Luca Bonfanti from Italy, who has got a different approach as well, because he's selling the NFT, and as well he's donating or gifting a bottle of a very special wine to whoever buys the NFT, because in his mind, when you look at art and you have that extra sensorial emotion to go with it, it's an added bonus in order to enjoy the art. In the same line, we've got Vika Kova, whom I've known for a while. She's from the Netherlands, and She does NFTs, but also mapping on buildings, etc. And her idea is that people need to feel good. Like, she wants to fulfill that need to feel good when they look at her art, and therefore it's called Land of Good. Then we've got Marcella in Canada, who's a graphic designer who's been working for many, many years. So she's just embraced the technology, and I believe is loving it. So we're really happy to have her on the platform. We've got Mike Newgogo, who's from America, and who's done some very nice, actually, abstract, I'd say sort of, it's like a bit like you take your pencil and you follow the line and you just see where it takes you. And I think it's very wonderful and poetic. And last but not least, and we've got Sandro Pedroval, who's been working for museums for a long, long time. He's actually working as almost like appropriation of the master and creating NFTs, which is fantastic. So, and then again, like, we will be working with people like Aaron Rose, whenever they, whenever our clients or our leads, if you like, our onboarders, I should call them, aren't so savvy with the technology, but have the ideas and the creativity. And then, with a lot of discussion, we'll come hopefully to a satisfactory result, which will be, again, at the end of the day, I think the story and the collectability of the item is what counts. That's it, basically. I don't think we have any more questions. We didn't get that much engagement this time. So guys, if you have questions later on, don't forget you can call us. And I'd like to take my leave and thank everybody very much. Wish everybody a very merry, silly season, as I call it. And see you in the next year. And Joy, if you want to wrap it up, that would be great. We're at the end of the hour.
Oh, yes. Forgot to unmute myself. Yes, well, wow. I think, yeah, we're almost done with time, so I'm not gonna risk asking too many more last questions. But before finishing, I would just like to inform everyone that WISe.ART is open to artists, dealers, and museums and collectors. We're looking to go to really fully open our platform in early 2022. At the moment, the past events we've had, our NASDAQ investment day with WISeKEY, and we've also attended my Art Basel Miami Week. So that was very interesting. There's a lot of craze for the NFT and new technology. So we see that the art world is moving into a digital direction. We still have yet to see whether other art fairs will be incorporating more NFT into their art shows or still remaining with traditional art. I think it's very interesting to see kind of art and tech slowly converging even at these trade shows. So that'll be interesting to see moving forward. And we're also now launching our LinkedIn and Facebook. It's still very much in the early phase, but we're now setting up our social media for WISe.ART. So that's a little bit of the announcement. So we'll be kind of posting a lot more updates on events and some of the stuff that we're working on our socials. For the guest speakers, would you like to kind of leave any parting words for the audience before we conclude? If you have anything else to say, any announcements, now's the time.
Just, I think it's, this space is moving really quickly, but that shouldn't stop anybody for trying to engage and learn and sort of dip their toe in. If you fail fast, and you learn and you get up and like try again. But that's the important thing. Things like everybody's really learning in the space right now. There's no hard and fast rules. And it's sort of our world to make right now. And I think that's a great opportunity. And we shouldn't take it lightly, because we've seen these past generations and where things have kind of concentrated into certain structures. And I think if we can really help encourage that decentralization, that only benefits all of us. So to work towards that and find ways to kind of dare is really important.
Yeah, well, it was super well said, and Rose. I think that's really what this is all about. And I think for again, I want to just call out to artists as well and collectors that this is something we have a chance to make here. And let's keep that spirit, like this openness and this kind of spirit of exchange and kind of growing together. And we can actually overturn some of the models that are maybe a little oppressive is maybe the wrong word, but a little bit restrictive, like perhaps in the market, and disrupt the market and find new ways of collaboration, new ways of monetizing art as well, where maybe the artist comes first and not last, and those kinds of things. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and we're just at the beginning. This is an exciting journey ahead, and a lot of things will happen. When we speak again in 6 months, the world will be different already.
Indeed, it will be. Indeed, it will be.
We're all we'll have our augmented reality faces on. We'll be all doing this with our holograms and everything, and going, it's totally normal.
It was 12 months for that one, but yeah. For sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, on behalf of the WISeKEY team and the WISeArt team, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time for speaking here today. And I would also like to thank the audience for the questions and participating. This has been a lovely webinar for me. I hope you all enjoyed it equally. And in the meantime, I would like to wish you all a peaceful and happy holiday season. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.